one question per journalist, please. Let's stick to that. There. Yes, Halima. Please introduce yourself, the organization, and ask only one question for this first round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Odinga. I hope you can hear me. I don't know if this is working. Halima, it is? Great. Halima Gikandi from the World Radio Program. Police violence has been a problem in Kenya for many years, including in the previous election, in the previous administration. You're saying that there's an ethnic tone to it. The question is, what evidence do you have that the police is carrying out some form of ethnic cleansing? Because the bar is quite high to make that statement.
Can you raise your voice a little bit?
Yes, Halima Gikandi from the World...
No, just the question itself. Just go straight to the question. Halima, I've understood you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What evidence do you have?
Halima Gikandi from the World Radio Program.
You say, what evidence do I have about...
ethnic cleansing from the police.
Okay.
Thank you. And can you please clarify who the ethnic cleansing is against? Thank you.
Of course, but it is very obvious the way the police have handled themselves. You can see that what happened in Kisumu did not happen anywhere else in the country. In Kisumu, police went into residential estates and targeted people who were in their homes, and they were being taken out of their homes and clobbered on the streets, shot with live bullets. It has not happened anywhere in other parts of the country, apart from also here in Nairobi in some estates, not all estates. So it is very obvious that it is targeted at a certain community. You see what happened in Sondo, where armed militia carrying bows and arrows, being escorted by the police officers, by shooting at sitting targets, individuals who are people who had just gone to the marketplace and being shot with bows and arrows. 18 are in hospital as we speak, and 3 were killed by the arrows. Nobody has been arrested. In other parts, like in Bondo, in Siaya, in Migori particularly, the use of live bullets. In Homa Bay as well. Why do you target only those 4 counties? And then here in the estates, the same thing. So it is obvious that there is ethnic cleansing aspect in this conflict. They're targeting a particular community.
Okay. That gentleman at the back.
My name is Patrick Gatua from ARD German Television. Everything that's happening is affecting Kenya, but the hue and cries for Kenyans is really the high cost of living. So how do you go about that? And do the Mandanos still continue? And for how long is that?
We say that the genesis of the problem we're having today is because the tax bill. It was a bill at that time, and Kenyans protested that the cost of living was already too high, and that this tax bill, if it was passed, was going to actually increase the burden on the people. For example, the proposal to increase the fuel, the levy, the VAT from 8% to 16%, basically doubling it. People were opposed to it. Opinion polls were carried out by professional firms, and it showed that between 90 to 95% of Kenyans were opposed to this bill. If it's a government that is a caring government who cares about people's opinion, this bill should have been withdrawn and renegotiated. That was not done. In fact, the government itself said that wapende wasipende, this bill will pass as drafted, and members of parliament were coerced and bribed. I think one of the leaders in the House, I don't know whether the deputy leader, majority leader in the House, has gone out bragging, saying that they bought members of parliament, particularly from the opposition, to vote for the bill. And that's what this bill was passed against the public will, the people of Kenya. And it is the cause of the current crisis.
Patrick, do you feel it's sufficiently answered?
Prime Minister, my question is very simple, sir. How long will the Mandanos go on in the country, and is there another form of actually addressing the situation in the country? Is dialogue an option?
We always say that we are open to dialogue. You remember, at one time we were asked to call off Mandanos so that there could be dialogue. And we called off the Mandanos. And we set up a team to carry out negotiations consisting of 7 members led by an eminent lawyer. The other side gave us their second league to negotiate with our people. So as soon as the tempers went down, the temperatures went down, they called off the talks. They were no longer interested in those talks at all. There were clear issues, fundamental issues, which were on the table. One was the issue of the cost of living, which is very high. That was really number one issue. Number 2 issue was issue of electoral justice, which I've already alluded to right now, the issue of putting a closure completely to the last elections in light of the information that came to light from the whistleblower. So we said, in order to settle the anxiety among the people of Kenya, let us do a professional audit, forensic audit of the server in the last elections. Because as you remember, during the counting and tallying at the Bomas of Kenya, there was a dispute among the commissioners. You had an electoral commission consisting of 7 members. Out of those 7 members, only 3 agreed with the results which was announced, including the chairman, by the chairman. 4 commissioners disagreed. They disputed the results, and they walked out, which is a very unprecedented move in the entire continent of Africa. And they went and gave a press conference and saying that they did not approve the results being announced by the chairman of the Electoral Commission. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court agreed with the chairman to our consternation. And since that time, those 4 commissioners who disagreed have been hunted out of office. They've been kicked out of the office, although their term had not expired. So we say that these 4 commissioners need to be reinstated because they did not commit a crime. They had a security of tenure, and disagreeing with the chairman on the outcome of the result being announced is not a crime. Not a crime. Even if the results were upheld by the Supreme Court, those people still had a contract running. That was another second issue. The third issue was the issue of inclusivity in government. We have said ourselves that we don't want they have the loaf. Those are times I talk about Nusumukati. We don't want any part in this government. We say that very clearly. But we said that people who voted for Azimio are Kenyans. They are entitled to opportunities in the country. When you are hiring public servants, civil servants, or promoting them, there should be no discrimination. Because communities where these people come from also pay taxes. But they have been bypassed. Most of them have been sacked from public services, mainly because they come from the so-called wrong communities. As you know, we got more members of parliament in the National Assembly than these people. We are 50-50 in the Senate, even the government ministerial. So at worst, we hold 50% of the country come from our side. When the deputy president himself goes public and says that Kenya is a corporation, that the people with shares, that some communities with more shares than others, there are other communities which have no shares at all, what are our people supposed to do? Self-determination. Because what are we doing in Kenya if we have no shares in the government, if our people are not entitled to any kind of opportunities in the country? So that was an issue which was on the table. Then the other one was this invasion of political parties. We have coalitions, two major coalitions, Azimio coalition and Kenya Kwanza coalition. As I mentioned already, Azimio coalition had the majority of members in the National Assembly. But it immediately started invading Azimio coalition by buying leadership of some parties affiliated to Azimio to cross, contrary to the coalition agreement that was signed, and also contrary to the Act of Parliament, which requires that if a member of Parliament elected on a particular party's ticket wants to cross the floor, then he has to resign or he loses his seat and goes and recontest in a by-election. I myself, when I disagreed with my party that has sponsored me to Parliament in 1997, I resigned from Parliament and I went and was re-elected by my people back to Parliament. So we are saying that all these members of these other parties, the UDM, for example, the Jubilee members of Parliament, and ODM members who have for all intents and purposes crossed over to the Kenya Kwanza ought to lose their seats and go and recontest their positions. That was also an issue which is on the table for discussions. So we had very fundamental issues which were being discussed, and these people just absconded and went away. What were we supposed to do? To sit and remain quiet when they then imposed the finance bill on us, now an act of parliament, the cost of living is rising up. So we had no other option. Then we've also invoked another provision in our constitution which says that the sovereignty in the Republic of Kenya rests with the people of Kenya. That the people can either exercise it directly or through delegation to elected leaders. So what we've started is to collect signatures of the people to show that they have no confidence in this government. Ruto got supposedly, according to Chebukati, 7.1 million. Already you have 8 million signatures signed, authentic people who are registered, who are saying that they've withdrawn their support for Mr. Ruto and Mr. Gachagua. So this we are also going to present.
I think the question was on the cost of living. It's not only affecting Kenya, the world over. We also have the weakening of the dollar and other factors. What, in your opinion, would it be for the cost of living?
See, you said, and I said I was talking from experience as somebody who was around the government also before. You said that you do not deal with the cost of living by increasing taxes. In fact, if you increase taxes, you are increasing the cost of living in the country. They are saying they're increasing taxes because they want to pay debts. And I say that there are other ways in which you can deal with the debt issue, debt crisis, other than just trying to increase taxes to pay those debts. The economy is in recession. So if the economy is in recession, what you do is you create consumption. You inject money into the economy so that people have got money in their pockets that they can spend, and then the economy will revive. So what they have done basically is removing money from people's pockets to be able to pay. So you're in the hole and you're continuing to dig deeper. I don't know who is advising them, but we've got very, very good economists who would advise them better. And that's why I'm saying that me would have handled this situation differently. But we have been here before, and we got out of it with the former President Mwai Kibaki. So, and we can get out of it.
All right. We have a question there.
Yeah.
Gilbert.
Your Excellency, Ruud Elmendorf for the Dutch newspaper, The Telegraaf. I have to be open with you. I was a bit worried last week when the Mandanos started, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Normally you're on the forefront of demonstrations. We didn't see you. So what held you back?
I didn't get that question.
Again?
Yes.
But I come back to that.
Huh?
Your absence from Mandamano, could you explain that?
Oh, you see, I mentioned that this Mandamano is not about Raila or Kalonzo or other Azimio leaders. It is now a Kenyan affair. It's a people's affair. I've been in Mandamanos all the time, as you know. If I've missed in one of those Mandamanos, it does not matter. They will still take place anyway. But I said I was down with the flu, and that's why I was not on the streets.
Yes, Gilbert? Do you have a question?
Hello, Mariama Diallo from Voice of America. Very quickly, I want to follow up on where do talks stand. Obviously, in the beginning of the protest, there seemed to be dialogue because of that formation of that bipartisan group to deal with the IEBC audit issues. But that has stalled, and it seems like just there's no movement. So my question to you is, if President Ruto reached out to you today and say, brother Raila, let's sit down and have a talk with no preconditions, would you respond to that? Would you sit down with him to try to deal with the issues? And just a quick follow-up question. You questioned the Kenyan Constitution today. You used very strong words, obviously, towards accusations towards the police. Not feeling protected by that police that is supposed to protect you as a Kenyan and that is supposed to protect you, your people or protesters. What would you like to see happen? Thank you.
You see, it's not for the first time. You remember there's a time when the situation was very polarized and charged, when President Ruto publicly appealed to me and said that we should call off the Mandamano and dialogue against protest from my people. We agreed to call off the Mandamano at that time and give room for dialogue. And I just said that as soon as the temperatures come down, it was business as usual. They set up a team and eventually they withdrew. Those members of that team were not available. Each time our people assembled, they would say most of their members are out of the country, they cannot raise a quorum. In that they were not serious at all. See, but you need to also know that there have been also attempts from outside. I can now say it here, that the president from Tanzania came here 2 weeks ago at the invitation of President Ruto to mediate, and she was kept waiting, not from our side. We were available, but the other side was not available. She spent 2 nights here, and it was all in vain. Other people have tried. Right now I know the other people are also trying, but he's the one who's resisting. So basically knows what he wants. I myself have said I'm ready to sit with other people to discuss these issues. He is actually pretending, is living in delusion that we don't have a crisis. But we have a serious crisis that requires patriotism to resolve. And we are ready ourselves.
Yes.
And what would you like to see? Obviously, there's a police that's here that's supposed to protect all Kenyans. You have very strong words today. You're accusing them, but they also accuse you and your people of protesting illegal. So what would you like to say?
I'm saying the police are just like their boss living in delusion. You yourself, you're living here practically. You've seen what I'm talking about. I'm not making it up. The media has been present. You've carried most of this on screens. You've seen them on CNN, seen them on BBC. You see, all the international media has been carrying out those very, very disturbing scenes of the horror of police shooting innocent people. You find a police officer wearing a civilian going out there to Madari estate and then removing his pistol and shooting a 15-year-old young man and shooting another guy there and running away in full view camera. Nothing has happened to that police officer. So what we are seeing here, similar to what you can call, you can give international parallels. Tom Makut, Papadoc Debalie, the late president or dictator of Haiti. You saw what happened in Liberia. You saw Pol Pot in Cambodia. They've happened in many different parts of the world. The scenes that we're seeing here today, they are not new, but the fate of those regimes is also unknown.
Thank you. Evelyn Musambi from the Associated Press. There seems to be a bit of judicial goodwill, at least from the people of Kenya, a bit of reprieve when Okiya Omtata, for example, went to court over the finance bill. Are you planning to take the legal route, the judicial route? Are you going to fight as hard on that front, as hard as you're fighting on the civil route of getting Kenyans to sign and getting Kenyans to protest?
No, it has to be a combination. Why? Because these people are not respecting the rulings of the courts. If you take, for example, the finance bill, the court suspended implementation of the finance bill, particularly that section that deals with the raising of the VAT on fuel from 8% to 16%. But the regulator of APR ignored it and implemented the increases directly. In other words, as the process is going on in court, they are busy implementing and defying the court orders. And that's the reason why it cannot be just one process. It has to be both. Okiya Omtata and his team will fight in court, our people will fight on the streets.
Yes, Tim?
Good morning. I would like to know about your position for the
Please,
African
hello,
Summit.
please introduce your name, yourself, and the organization, and take the mic, yes.
Thank you. Television, and I would like to know your position on the Russia-Africa Summit, please.
Russia-Africa Summit, I think it's BRICS. BRICS is not Russia-Africa.
Elaborate. Gilbert, just give him to elaborate.
There will be the Russia-Africa Summit on Thursday in St. Petersburg. And you mentioned Kenya's position, which was formally very clear on Russia's war against the Ukraine. So I was wondering how you are looking at this summit on Thursday.
I don't think that at this moment in time it's really time for a summit between Russia, because Russia is involved in a war, a conflict. Just like Ukraine-Africa summit would also not be welcome at the moment. That is a war situation, and Africa needs to take a very firm stand on this issue. It's a question of right and wrong, and therefore my view is that we cannot be neutral in the place of an aggression. We must take a stand one way or the other. So I'm thinking that Russia-Africa summit at the moment in time is not politically advisable.
Ngamba, AFP. I was wondering, you mentioned the dire situation of the economy. Don't you think that the demos that you are organizing are hurting also the economy? And just a follow-up, just to clarify what you meant when you mentioned Nazi Germany and the Jews, are you really making this comparison? Thank you.
You see, I would say that the economy is hurting, not because of the demonstrations, but because of bad policies which are being implemented by this government. You see, that is what has brought this country to where it is. They were blaming President Uhuru Kenyatta and his regime of having fleeced the country. Uhuru left government in September last year. We are now in July. They have run this government for the last 10 months. Within that 10 months, of course, they should have seen some kind of turnaround, some changes. Yet the country is actually plunging deeper and deeper into debts. They were saying Uhuru had overborrowed. Within a certain period of time, they borrowed much more than Uhuru did borrow in a comparable period during his reign. And it's still going on. They continue to borrow more. There's no end in sight. So they came up, for example, with this idea of G2G in terms of oil procurement, which has actually now caused a serious crisis. When the time for repayment is going to come up, it's going to be very, very serious. That's why they have to raise taxes. Instead of leaving the private sector to deal with oil. I used to be Minister for Energy before, and during my time is when OTS was established. They have abandoned it, and some of the players have migrated to Tanzania, some to Uganda, and so on. See, and then they came up with this idea of reviving the dead state corporation, the Kenya National Trading Corporation, to do business. Now the government is now becoming the importer of essential commodities. They imported rice, imported wheat, imported maize, imported cooking oil, importing sugar, and so on, supposedly to bring down the cost of these commodities on the market. These commodities are being imported duty-free through the port of Mombasa, but the retail price is higher than the ones which are produced locally or processed locally by the private companies that used to do it before. Where is that money going to? The pocket of the bureaucrats and the ministers of this government. Corruption has gone up more than double since Uhuru left the government. So there are many issues why this government is not coming up, and I just want to assure you, even if they give another 5 years, they will not come up. You got the wrong people in the steering, and this government is going to continue to dig deeper and deeper into the mess. They will not come out of it. What was your second question? Yeah, of course, What they're trying to do, I lived in Germany, by the way, for 80 years. And I can tell you the history of the fascists, how it started. You see, how Hitler started it as a joke. The emergence of the brown-headed boys. And eventually, the final solution. The final solution of the Jews thing. And this is what they're trying to do, target one particular community, and you have a final solution to them. You see, that is what is happening here. So targeted at the Jews, it ended up consuming everybody, including what they call Eshed Arya, the pure Aryans themselves. Millions and millions were killed. So we are saying we don't want Kenya to go that route.
Any more questions? Follow-up? Okay, thank you very much. Sure.
This is reminding me, I don't think you, in my earlier question, you just explicitly say which group is being targeted for the record. I asked that in my first question.
We have not missed words. We have said it in our press statement before, and I've said it's actually targeting a community in Nyanza called the Luos are being targeted. That's why there's been disproportionate use of live bullets in Migori, in Homa Bay, in Kisumu, in Siaya. And we also say that there's also use of arrows, poisoned arrows, in Sondu market in Kisumu district, where 18 people were shot with arrows. Those militia were being escorted by the police, and they were shooting, and the police did nothing. Police were firing in the air to protect them. So if that is not ethnic cleansing, then I don't know what ethnic cleansing is all about.
Does that answer your question? Good. Any further questions before we close? Yes? Gilbert, just give the mic. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Achola Rosario. I'm freelancing for El País. I was wondering if you could just comment briefly on the Hustler Fund, whether it was just a con that was sold to people or it was something that is actually going to lift people out of poverty.
I want to allow some of my colleagues to answer some of those questions.
Sure.
I want to have Eugene Romalo.
Gilbert?
If you can give him a mic.
Mic.
Thank you. I think His Excellency has explained some of the failed policies of this regime. I think that is one of them. There's totally been lack of accountability as to the source of the funding and transparency in the application of those funds. So if you ask us about Hustler Fund, we don't know what it's about. We don't know where it's coming from, where it's going. Thank you.
That's also another one that's been happening the past few months, and that has the potential to affect, obviously, neighboring countries, and Kenya. So would you mind, commenting on that, if possible?
I want a colleague, Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, to deal with that question.
Both Sudan and Republic of South Sudan are members of IGAD community. I, until recently, was a Kenyan special envoy to the South Sudan. And while we were busy dealing with the situation in the Republic of South Sudan, trouble also erupted in the north. And what has been happening in Sudan is a matter of grave concern, not just to the region, but internationally. You get two generals who initially linked up or teamed up with the civilians to topple the dictatorship then of President al-Bashir. But instead of handing over after a year, as they had committed in writing to doing, to the civilians, remember Prime Minister Hamdok was hounded out of office, and then the generals stand on each other, and the result is catastrophic. The number of refugees now in Chad, others heading north to Egypt, and others in South Sudan itself, in Ethiopia, in the region, is alarming. So I think we have all, as international community, a responsibility because that country is going down very fast. And apparently, even as they meet in Jeddah, they're still fighting. General Buhran on the one hand, and Hamedi, who was supposed to be the vice chair of the council, quite frankly, it's a very difficult situation. I know that some in this part of the world wanted to intervene, and then others said, no, we think you're part of the problem. So we, as a country, are very concerned. And if there's anything that we can do from the point of view of the Horn of Africa crisis, that's why our leader, Brother Raila, was very clear about this, that Kenya is seen to be the bastion of peace and harmony. That's why we can't afford to have Kenya go down the drain, because it's a anchor nation within even the community of IGAD. So what remains of IGAD itself is a problem. We do not know. The situation in Somalia, and now in Sudan, Ethiopia, of course, you all know, has had huge problems. And so let's work hard as a region, including helping. At least humanitarian assistance in Sudan seems to be the only hope those people have. But talk of 3 million refugees across Chad and the region is really very disturbing. So, and we hear, even in those parts, we cannot understand why, personally, can't understand. We used to hear of executive outcomes. Those are a group of mercenaries operating in southern Africa. Now this one group seems to be, the world is now getting socialized to the reality of mercenary interference, even within African countries. In Mali, we hear even perhaps in Sudan itself, the world has reason to feel very concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kalonzo. Wrap this up. Yes.
I can add, perhaps we could get a message or a comment to families that have lost. The opposition has counted 50 people so far to the ongoing protests. And as we keep fighting, then what are we doing about the people that are losing their lives in this fight? Even though they're fighting for themselves, they're fighting perhaps from a call of the opposition saying, let's do this. What is the reprieve for these families and all these victims?
Well, the families, who have lost their loved ones, we of course condole with them. And also those who are injured, who are in various institutions undergoing treatment, we also say we pray for them. That's the reason why we called off tomorrow's Mandamano, so that people can keep vigil and also pray. We are also going to launch a fund to help those families who have lost their relatives and those who are still in hospital. So this fund is going to be announced in the course of the day. Today is tomorrow, so that people can contribute directly to the fund, and which will help us to support these victims.
Great, thank you very much, Honorable Raila and journalists, for having these conversations with us. Thank you very much. We will end the conversations here. I would like to request for the journalists to wait once Honorable Odinga and the dignitaries leave, then we can proceed after that. Thank you.
Well, just a reminder that please don't leave without having a taste of our hospitality. We have a light breakfast.